Welcome to the subject of business law. I am Dr. Rama Bansal, working as assistant professor in the Department of Commerce and Business Management at Arya College, Ludhiana. Today I am going to discuss the topic Introduction to Sales of Goods Act 1930. So, in this presentation, I would cover the topics: what is the contract of sale, what are the essentials of a contract of sale, difference between sale and agreement to sell, and the subject matter of the contract. So, now, first of all, let's see what is a Sales of Goods Act. Basically, Sales of Goods Act 1930 deals with the law relating to sale of goods in India. This act came into force on 1st July 1930. It contains total 66 sections, and this act extends to whole of India including the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Section 4 of this act defines that a contract of sale of goods is a contract whereby the seller transfers or agrees to transfer the property in goods to a buyer for a price. The definition itself explains what the Sales of Goods Act. When we make a contract of sale, it consists of a sale or an agreement to sell. Now, when we make this contract under the Sales of Good Act 1930, there are a few concepts which we need to know before discussing its valid features. So the first one is the what is the meaning of sale or absolute sale? When the property in goods is immediately transferred from seller to buyer. That means when the contract is performed, every kind of good is being immediately transferred from the seller side to the buyer side, and there is nothing to perform in the contract. That type of contract, that type of transfer is known as sale or absolute sale. When we talk about agreement to sale or the conditional sale, when the transfer of property would take place in future, when some certain kind of conditions would be fulfilled, only then the goods would be passed to the next person. This is called as agreement to sell or the conditional sale. Now, every agreement to sale in end becomes a sale. How? When seller and buyer agrees to sell and buy some goods at a price, there is an agreement between the two for the sale of goods. But when the ownership is transferred, immediately it becomes a sale. That means the contract, the agreement to sell becomes the sale on the transfer of ownership of the goods from the seller side to the buyer. Now let's discuss the essentials of a contract of a sale. So first of all, the first essential is there should be a valid contract. We know there are a few essentials of a contract under section 10 of Indian Contract Act 1872, like offer and acceptance. There must be legal relationship. There must be some consideration. The parties should be capable to perform the contract and many more. That means when there is a contract under this act, it must satisfy all the essentials of a valid contract under section 10 of Indian Contract Act 1872. Next is there must be at least two parties so that one can become the seller and other can become the buyer. So there must be at least two different persons for that. Let's discuss the example. A club supplies food and drinks to its member at fixed price. So this was held to be not a sale, as a member of club pays to the members jointly that it to the club. Members of a club are undivided joint owners and not part owners. That means here the members and the club both are the one party, but for making this contract a valid contract, we need at least two persons. But there are certain exceptions to this rule. One is where a person's goods are sold in execution of a decree. In that case, he may himself be there. A part owner can sell his share to the other part owner, where a pani sells the goods pledged by him on non-payment of bill money. In that case, paner can sell the goods to himself. A partner may also buy the goods from the firm. In case there is a sale by auction, the seller may reserve right for making a bid in the auction sale. Third point of the essentials is agreement for the transfer of ownership. Whenever there is a contract of sale under this act, there must be an agreement in which the seller agrees to transfer the ownership of goods to the other person. And this transfer of ownership may be with or without physical possessions of the goods. That means in contract of sale, sale would be there if the ownership is transferred. The possession may or may not be transferred. Next is the goods. The subject matter of the contract of sale must be goods. Now, what is the meaning of the goods under this contract? Let's see the example where the trees were sold so that they were to be cut out and separated from land and taken away by the buyer. The contract was the sale of trees as movable goods. That means when the goods in form of trees are there, means when the trees are cut, it becomes movable. So when it becomes movable, it is counted under the category of goods. Then the money, actionable claims and immovable property are excluded from the definition of goods. Money because it's a legal tender and it is an essential part of every sale. So money cannot be held as a subject of any sale. Then the actionable claims means claims which can be enforced by a legal action or a suit are excluded from the definition of goods. Next essential is the price. What is the price? Price is a consideration. We know this is an essential under section 10 of Indian Contract Act 1872. That means there must be some consideration. So here the consideration should be the price. Consideration for transfer must be money paid or promised. Normally consideration, the transaction is not a contract of sale, but the consideration may partly be in money or partly be in form of goods. Let's see the example. A refrigerator company supplies a new refrigerator of rupees 9,000 in exchange of old refrigerator and rupees 6,000 in cash. So it is a sale under the contract of under the Sales of Goods Act 1930. We have discussed two terms. One is the sale, second one is the agreement to sell. Now, what is the difference between the sale and the agreement to sale? The first point of difference is the nature of contract. Sale is an executed contract in which no performance is left, whereas agreement to sell is an executory contract in which one or two parties are yet left to perform their task. Second point of difference is the transfer of ownership. In sale, ownership is transferred immediately. But in case of agreement to sell, ownership is transferred at some future date and is subject to fulfillment of certain conditions, which means if certain conditions would be fulfilled, only then the ownership of goods would be transferred to the other party. Third one is the risk of loss. In case of sale, risk of loss falls on the buyer because the ownership of the goods is being transferred. Even if the possession of the goods is with the seller, even then the risk falls on the buyer because at present after sale the buyer would be the owner of the goods. In case of agreement to sell, risk of loss falls on seller because the buyer is not yet the owner of the goods. Goods are under the possession and ownership of the seller, so he would be responsible. Next is the consequences of the breach. In case of default of buyer, the seller may sue for damages only, not for the price. But if buyer does not pay the price, the seller may sue for the price under the sale. But in case of agreement to sell, The buyer has only a personal remedy against the seller, and if in case the seller defaults, the buyer may sue for delivery of goods or for damages both. Next point of difference is the insolvency of the seller. The buyer is entitled to recover the goods from the official receiver. Suppose in case of sale, the seller becomes insolvent. Now the buyer has this right that he can recover the goods from the official receiver of the seller. And next, in case of agreement to sell, buyer can claim only a rateable dividend and not the goods because the ownership was not transferred to him yet. In case of sale, there is a journal and particular property. It creates a right in rem because it is now with the goods are being sold, the ownership is being transferred. But in case of agreement to sell, it creates a right in personam only. Next here, right of resale. In case of sale, seller cannot resell the goods because the ownership is being transferred. But in case of agreement to sell, the seller can sell the goods as the ownership is still with the seller. Next is insolvency of the buyer. Seller is bound to deliver the goods to the official receiver or the assignee of the buyer. And in case of agreement to sell, when the buyer becomes insolvent, before he pays for the goods, the seller may not part with the goods, means the seller would not lose the lien of the goods and goods would be remain in the custody of the seller. Now, let's discuss the last part of the presentation, that is a subject matter of a contract. When we say the subject matter, that means we are talking about the goods. Here, under this contract, goods can be divided into three categories. One are the existing goods. Existing goods are those goods when the contract was made, the seller owned those goods at that time. So when the contract was made, the goods were in existence. So that goods are known as the existing goods. That means, in other words, if existing goods are the subject matter of the contract, then they should be in existence in actual. Let's see the example. If Mr. A sell his horse to Mr. B, believing it to be in existence, but in fact the horse is dead, so no contract will arise because the goods which were assumed as existing were not in existence. Further, the existing goods can be divided as one, the specific goods. The specific goods are those goods which are identified and agreed upon at the time of the contract. Let's see the example. In the case of sale of one horse out of 25 horses, goods shall be specific if the horse is selected before the contract of sale is made. That means the goods are in existence and the buyer has specifically chosen the goods for him or her. That means these type of goods are known as specific goods. Ascertain goods. Ascertain goods are identified after the contract of sales as per the terms decided. Let's see the example. If there is going to be a sale of 25 chairs for an office, out of a lot of 100 chairs of same design and quality, the goods are unascertained till 25 chairs are being selected. The third category of goods is unascertain goods. Goods which are not separately identified at the time of making a contract of sale are known as unascertain goods. In these type of goods, buyer does not select any type of goods out of lot, but the goods are defined or indicated only by description through the buyer. Second type of goods is a future goods. Means when the contract was made, the goods were not in existence. That means goods are still to be manufactured or still are to be produced or acquired by the seller, and this process will happen after the making of the contract of sale. So the ownership of goods in these type of goods, future goods, cannot be transferred because the goods are not in existence. So in case of future goods, there is always an agreement to sell, not the absolute sale. Let's see the example. P agrees to sell all the mangoes which will be produced in his garden next year. That means mangoes are not at present in existence. It would be produced in the future. So in that case, this is an agreement for the sale of future goods. And last type of goods are the contingent goods. Contingent goods are basically the future goods, but the acquisition or production of these type of goods would depend upon a contingency which may or may not happen. Means if the contingency happen, the goods would be present. If the contingency doesn't happen, the good may not be acquired. So these contracts give no right of action if the contingency does not happen, because the goods would not be available. Let's see the example. A agrees to sell B a certain ring provided he is able to purchase it from its present owner. So this is an agreement for the sale of contingent goods, because the condition that if he is able to purchase it, if this condition happens, that means the contingency happens, there would be a contract of sale. If this contingency doesn't happen, there would not be a contract of sale. That means there are three type of goods, there are three type of subject matters in a contract of sale: existing goods, future goods, and the contingent goods. So in today's presentation, we have discussed what is the meaning of the Sales of Goods Act, what are the meaning of the sale and agreement to sell. Then we have discussed about the various elements, various essentials of a valid contract under the Sales of Goods Act 1930, and at last we have discussed about the subject matter of the Sales of Goods Act 1930. So I end my lecture by this. Thank you so much.